in the hope that somebody will come along and say, there's money in this, let's support Meghan and her as ever brand.
Something is deeply wrong with Meghan Markle's story. And not in the way the tabloids have been casually throwing around for years. I mean something structurally wrong. Something that goes to the very foundation of who this woman says she is. Her name, her past, and the one thing none of us ever think to question about a public figure. Her age. Now I know what you're thinking. Her age? Really? That's what we're talking about? Stay with me, because by the time we get to the end of this video, you are going to have serious questions. Questions that Meghan Markle has not answered. Questions her legal team has actively tried to suppress. And questions that one of Britain's most feared investigative biographers, Tom Bower, has spent years and years trying to expose. Today, we are going to walk through every single piece of evidence, the magazine archives, the university records, the testimony from people who knew her, the birth certificate that was quietly altered, the father who went strangely silent when asked a simple question, and the half-sister whose memory doesn't match the official story. This is not gossip. This is a paper trail, and it leads somewhere very uncomfortable for Meghan Markle. Let's get into it. Who is Tom Bower and why does he matter? Before we go anywhere near the age controversy, you need to understand exactly who Tom Bower is, because that context matters enormously. Tom Bower is not a blogger. He is not a social media commentator with a grudge. He is one of the most respected and feared investigative biographers in the entire United Kingdom. The man has spent decades taking down powerful people who thought their secrets were safe. He wrote devastating exposés on media mogul Robert Maxwell. He investigated Mohammed Al-Fayed. He took on Simon Cowell. He dissected Prince Charles. These are not easy targets, and these are not books full of speculation. They are meticulously sourced, legally reviewed, and rigorously fact-checked. In 2022, Bower published Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors. And if you have not read it, let me tell you, it was brutal. Bower painted a portrait of Meghan Markle as someone calculating, deeply ambitious, and willing to do whatever it took to climb every ladder in front of her. His sources included palace insiders, former friends, colleagues from her acting days, and yes, members of her own family. The book became an instant bestseller, and Meghan's legal team responded immediately, with threats, demands for retractions, accusations of defamation. But here is the critical thing. Bower had receipts. He had sources on record and off.
With the show, certainly what hospitality has felt like for me is, how do you make people feel comfortable?
He had documents. The legal threats went nowhere. And now, Bower is sharpening his quill again. A new edition is coming. And according to those close to the situation, what's in it has Meghan Markle's team working overtime. So when I tell you that Tom Bower has publicly raised questions about Meghan's age, questions backed by documented evidence, I need you to understand the weight of that. This is not a random accusation. This is a man with a career built on finding the truth that powerful people spend fortunes trying to hide. Ask yourself this: if these claims were so easily dismissed, why hasn't Meghan simply released her birth certificate and ended this once and for all? We'll come back to that question, but keep it in the back of your mind. The official story. Let's start with what we're told. Meghan Markle, full name Rachel Meghan Markle, was born on August 4, 1981, in Los Angeles, California. That makes her 44 years old as of this year. She attended Northwestern University, graduating in 2003 with a degree in theater and international studies. She began her acting career in the mid-2000s, holding briefcases on Deal or No Deal in 2006. She landed the role of Rachel Zane on the legal drama Suits in 2011. She married Prince Harry in 2018. She gave birth to Archie in May 2019 and Lilibet in June 2021. That is the official timeline. Clean, linear, makes perfect sense on paper. But Tom Bower started pulling at threads in that timeline, and once he started pulling, the whole thing began to unravel. The 17 magazine smoking gun. Let's start with what Bower has called the most concrete piece of documentary evidence, and I want you to pay very close attention here, because this is not hearsay. This is a published, verifiable, Physical Archive, March 1997, 17 Magazine, page 90. There is a feature article, and in that article, Meghan Markle is listed as 21 years old. Now, pause. Think about that. If Meghan was really born on August 4th, 1981, as she has always claimed, then in March of 1997, she would have been 15, turning 16, not 21. That is not a typo. That is not a rounding error. That is a 6-year discrepancy in a nationally published magazine. Tom Bauer didn't just stumble upon this reference and run with it. He went to the physical archives. He confirmed the publication date. He authenticated the article. It is real. So we are left with two possibilities. Either 17 Magazine made a catastrophic and bizarre error about the age of a completely unknown teenager.
Let's get through these next couple years, create community, which was always so important to both of us in our new environment.
A mistake that somehow never got corrected. Or someone, at some point, gave that magazine false information about how old she was. Now think about the second scenario for a moment. Who benefits from a 15-year-old being listed as 21 in a national magazine? Someone who wanted to be seen as older. Someone who maybe needed to appear older for professional or personal reasons. Someone who, at 15, was already carefully managing how the world perceived her. Does that sound far-fetched? Or does that sound like exactly the kind of thing a driven, ambitious young woman in Hollywood might do? And here's the question I want you to sit with. If your real age was listed correctly everywhere, would you even remember some old 17 Magazine article getting it wrong? Probably not. But if that old magazine article actually had your real age, the one you've been hiding, wouldn't you be very, very motivated to make sure nobody dug it up? The IMDb discrepancy. Let's layer on another piece of evidence, because the magazine archive alone could be explained away. Barely, but it could. What's harder to explain is what Bauer found on Meghan's own professional profile. IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, the gold standard for anyone working in film and television. If you are an actress, your IMDb page is essentially your professional identity. It lists your credits, your biography, and yes, your birth year. Tom Bauer discovered that Meghan's IMDb page originally listed her birth year as 1977, not 1981, 1977. Think about what that means. This is not a gossip magazine making an error. This is Meghan Markle's own professional acting profile, the profile maintained for the purposes of getting her work in Hollywood, listing a birth year that is 4 years earlier than the one she publicly claims. Why would that be? Bauer's answer is straightforward, and frankly, it makes complete sense when you understand how Hollywood works. In the entertainment industry, your age is currency, and depending on what you're going after, you want to be different ages for different reasons. If you want to compete for young ingenue roles, you want to be younger. But when you're building your early career profile and establishing credibility, sometimes appearing slightly older, more experienced, more established, works in your favor. At some point, Bauer argues, Meghan quietly updated her birth year on IMDb from 1977 to 1981. He has the screenshots. He has the before and after. And the question that nobody has been able to answer is, why would anyone change their birth year on their own professional profile unless one of those years wasn't telling the truth? The Northwestern evidence. Now we get to the university records. And this is where things get particularly fascinating and uncomfortable. Meghan Markle attended Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. She graduated in 2003 with a degree in theater and international studies, though it's worth noting that Northwestern has never actually offered a major called international studies. They offer international relations, a small detail, but it's the kind of small detail that matters when you're evaluating someone's relationship with accuracy. If Meghan was born in 1981 and graduated in 2003, that puts her at 22 years old at graduation. That's completely normal. That's a standard 4-year college trajectory. But Tom Bauer did something that most people wouldn't think to do. He contacted Meghan's classmates. He went through alumni directories. He looked at group photos from her time at Northwestern. And what he found was striking. Most of the people who were in Meghan's class, the people she studied with, socialized with, appeared in photos with, are now in their early to mid-50s, not their early 40s. their 50s. There is a particularly notable photo from Northwestern's salsa club. Meghan is in the back row, smiling alongside a group of other students. Bauer reached out to several people in that photo and asked a simple question: when were you born? They all gave him the same answer: early 1970s. So either Meghan was a 20-year-old who exclusively hung around people a decade older than her, which is unusual to say the least, or she was actually their peer, their contemporary, their age, and one of her former classmates, speaking to Bauer on condition of anonymity, because apparently this is still a sensitive enough topic that people don't want to attach their names to it, said something that ought to make your ears perk up. We all knew Meghan was older than she claimed. It was kind of an open secret in college, about her age. If that doesn't raise your eyebrows, I don't know what will. Thomas Markle's strange silence. Let's talk about Meghan's father, because this part of the story genuinely unsettles me, and I think it will unsettle you too. Thomas Markle has given dozens of interviews since Meghan married Prince Harry. The man is an open book, sometimes painfully so. He has talked about Meghan's childhood, her personality, her ambitions, the ways she treated her family. He has been candid, sometimes uncomfortably candid, about everything. Everything except one thing. Tom Bauer sat down with Thomas Markle for his research, and at some point during that conversation, he asked, what should have been the simplest question in the world? What year was Meghan born? A father should be able to answer that question in his sleep. There should be zero hesitation. It is one of the most basic biographical facts about your own child. You know it the way you know your own name. But Thomas Markle hesitated, and then, instead of saying August 4th, 1981, he said something that Bauer found deeply strange. He said, "You should check the records yourself." Check the records yourself. Not 1981, obviously. Not August 4th. You know this. Not any kind of confident, immediate fatherly recall of his daughter's birthday. Just go check the records. Now, I want to be fair here. There are innocent explanations for memory lapses. People get confused. Interviews can be disorienting. Maybe Thomas Markle was being cagey for his own reasons unrelated to any age controversy. But consider the full context. This is a man who remembers details about Meghan's childhood with remarkable clarity in other interviews. He talks about specific moments, specific conversations, specific behaviors. His memory when it comes to Meghan is clearly not poor in general. So why, when asked about her birth year specifically, does he go quiet and deflect? Tom Bauer found no satisfying answer to that question, and neither, frankly, have I. Samantha Markle's testimony. Now let's turn to Samantha Markle, because her account adds another layer to this mystery that is very difficult to dismiss. Samantha Markle is Meghan's half-sister from Thomas Markle's first marriage. According to the official timeline, Samantha was born in 1964. Meghan was born in 1981. That is a 17-year age gap between them. Think about what that means practically. If the official timeline is correct, Samantha was a 17-year-old when Meghan was born. By the time Meghan was old enough to play, Samantha was an adult, probably out of the house, living her own life. They would not have had a childhood together in any meaningful sense. They would not have been sisters who played together. The gap is simply too large. But here is what Samantha told Tom Bauer. She said, "The gap is much smaller than Meghan claims. We were closer in age growing up than people realize." Read that again. We were closer in age growing up than people realize. If Meghan was born in 1981 and Samantha in 1964, that statement makes no sense. You cannot be closer in age than a 17-year gap. That is not a matter of perception or feeling. It is mathematics. But if Meghan was born in, say, 1973 or 1975, as some of the evidence suggests, then the gap shrinks to somewhere between 9 and 11 years. Suddenly, Samantha's memory makes complete sense. Suddenly, they could have been sisters who actually played together, who grew up in overlapping phases of childhood, who felt like contemporaries in a way that a 17-year gap simply does not allow. Samantha has described Meghan as her little sis, with genuine affection behind it, the kind you develop from actual shared experience. And that kind of relationship, the one she seems to be describing, fits a much smaller age gap than the official story provides. the acting career evidence. Let's look at Meghan's career through the lens of the age question. Because when you do, some things that seemed unremarkable suddenly become very interesting. In 2006, Meghan was holding briefcases on Deal or No Deal. If she was 25, that makes total sense. A young actress doing whatever work she could get while she waited for her big break. Completely normal. No red flags. But Tom Bower dug deeper into her early career, and what he found was not the trajectory of a 20-something actress with her whole career ahead of her. What he found looked much more like the trajectory of someone who was aging out of the system and desperately trying to stay in it. Here is a brutal but real fact about Hollywood. Casting directors have hard age cutoffs for certain types of roles. If you are an unknown actress over 30, you start getting pushed into secondary categories. The mother, the older sister, the supporting role, the ingenue roles, the lead roles that launch careers. Those go to women who are younger or who appear younger. Meghan didn't land her breakout role as Rachel Zane on Suits until 2011. If she was born in 1981, she was 30 years old when she got that role. That's on the older side for a career-launching role, but it's not impossible. Plenty of actresses break through at 30, but if she was actually born in 1975, she was 36 when she landed Suits. That is a genuinely remarkable age to be landing a lead role on a major legal drama. Not impossible, but statistically unusual. And Bower's question is reasonable. Was she able to land that role partly because she appeared younger than she actually was? Because she had been managing her age carefully for years? The pattern of her career, the years of struggle, the grinding auditions, the commercial work, the bit parts, looks less like a young actress finding her footing and more like someone fighting against an age ceiling they were quietly approaching. The birth certificate alteration. Now we get to what is, arguably, the most striking piece of evidence in this entire story. Not because it definitively proves the age theory, it doesn't, but because it reveals a pattern of behavior around official documents that is very hard to explain innocently. When Archie Harrison was born in May 2019, his birth certificate was filed in the standard way. Mother's name, Rachel Meghan Markle. Normal, official, permanent. And then, weeks later, the document was amended. Meghan's first and middle names, Rachel Meghan, were quietly removed. The birth certificate was altered to list her simply as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Tom Bower investigated this extensively, and what he found was deeply unusual. Palace insiders told him this type of alteration to a royal birth certificate was extraordinarily rare. In fact, they said they couldn't remember it happening before, at all. So why would Meghan do this?
Women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice, they need to feel empowered to use it, and people need to be encouraged to listen.
Bower's theory is chillingly logical. If your legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle, appears on official documents, those documents become anchor points. They can be cross-referenced, investigated, compared to other records, school transcripts, passport applications, previous marriages, professional contracts. A paper trail connects everything. But if you remove that name from official documents, you make yourself harder to trace. You create a gap in the paper trail. You make it significantly more difficult for anyone digging through records under the name Rachel Meghan Markle to find the document that connects to Archie's mother. Bower's conclusion: this is not the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. This is the behavior of someone who is acutely, professionally aware of what a paper trail can reveal. And I'll ask you directly, does that interpretation seem paranoid to you? Or does it seem like a reasonable reading of a genuinely unusual decision? The legal implications. Let's talk about what this all means legally, because the stakes here are not just reputational, they are potentially enormous. Bower consulted with several legal experts for his research, and what they told him is sobering. If Meghan Markle provided false information about her age on official documents, marriage certificates, legal contracts, royal records, that is not just embarrassing. Under British law, that is potentially fraud. And fraud can be grounds for annulment of a marriage. Now let's be clear, nobody is saying the marriage is going to be annulled. That is not happening.
In celebrating the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage in your country.
But the legal possibility that it could be, that is not nothing. and the cascading implications of such a scenario would be extraordinary. The children's titles become questionable. The line of succession becomes complicated. The entire legal framework of their royal history comes under scrutiny. Beyond the marriage, there are the business contracts, Netflix, Spotify, speaking engagements, brand deals. Every single one of those contracts was built on biographical representations that Meghan or her team made about who she is. If any of those biographical representations were false, including something as basic as her age, those contracts could potentially be voided. She could be sued. She could lose the financial foundation she has spent years building. That is why, according to Bauer, Meghan is so desperate to keep this quiet. Because it's not just a matter of pride or vanity. If the age story falls apart, the financial empire potentially falls apart with it. The reaction and the silence. When Bauer's book came out, Meghan's response was swift and furious. And then, strangely, it stopped. Her legal team immediately sent threats to the publisher. They demanded retractions. They called the age claims baseless and defamatory, the usual playbook. But Bauer had receipts, magazine archives, university records, witness testimonies, photographs. The legal threats went nowhere. The book stayed on shelves. The evidence remained in print. And then Meghan went quiet. No public statement, no press conference, no appearance on a sympathetic talk show to calmly lay out the truth and prove everyone wrong, no birth certificate released to the public, just silence. Now, I want to think through that with you for a moment. Because silence is not neutral. Silence is a choice. If someone accused you of lying about your age and you had your birth certificate in your hands, the actual original document, what would you do? You would produce it immediately. You would end the story before it had a chance to breathe. Because the story dies the second the document appears. Meghan has not produced the document. Her team has not produced the document. In the years since Bauer's investigation went public, not a single piece of definitive documentary evidence proving her birth year as 1981 has been released. Bauer's read on that silence is blunt. If the timeline was clean, she'd release the evidence. She'd prove everyone wrong. She'd end the speculation. But she won't. And according to sources who spoke to him, it's because she can't. The bigger picture. Let's zoom out and look at this from the highest altitude, because I think the age question, as fascinating as it is actually almost secondary to what it represents. At the end of his research, Tom Bauer doesn't put a definitive number on Meghan's real age. He doesn't say she was born in 1973, or 1975, or 1977. What he does is lay out a pattern, a consistent, documented multi-decade pattern of a woman who has been deeply, carefully, strategically dishonest about the fundamental facts of her own life. The age discrepancy in 17 magazine, the altered birth year on IMDb, the classmates who remember her as older, the father who hesitates at the simplest question, the half-sister whose memory of their age gap doesn't match the official story, the birth certificate that was quietly altered to make her harder to trace. Each of these, in isolation, could be explained. Magazine errors happen. IMDb pages get updated. Memory is imperfect. Bureaucratic changes are made for all kinds of reasons. But together they form something that looks very different from a series of coincidences. Together they look like a woman who has spent decades managing her own mythology, carefully, deliberately, and with considerable sophistication. Bauer's portrait of Meghan is of an actress in the deepest sense of the word. Not just a woman who appeared on Suits, but a woman whose entire public persona is a performance. The humanitarian, the victim, the progressive royal, the devoted mother, the self-made woman. And underneath all of it, according to Bauer, something that doesn't quite match. A foundation that, when you start examining it closely, shows cracks. The kind of cracks that only appear when someone has been telling the same story for so long that the details start to contradict themselves. What happens next? So where does this leave us? Tom Bauer's new edition is coming. And according to those who have spoken to people close to the project, it contains material that goes further than anything in the first book. More documents, more testimony, more evidence of what Bauer believes is a pattern of biographical fabrication that stretches across decades. Meghan's professional situation is also worth noting. As Bauer himself has pointed out, her financial position has weakened significantly. The Netflix series has concluded. There is no major podcast generating revenue. The deals that once looked like the foundation of a post-royal empire have quietly declined. The momentum is not what it was. And in that context, the stakes of the Age story get higher, not lower. Because when you are wealthy and powerful, a scandal can be absorbed. When your financial position is under pressure, the same scandal becomes something far more threatening. The question is no longer just, is Meghan lying about her age? The question is what happens when Tom Bauer publishes his new findings? What happens when the documents he's compiled are put in front of the public in full? What happens when the people who have been speaking to him off the record decide, for whatever reason, to go on record? Because that is how these things always end. Not with a sudden dramatic confession, but with a slow accumulation of evidence that eventually becomes impossible to dismiss. Here is what I know for certain. Tom Bauer has spent years investigating Meghan Markle. He has spoken to hundreds of sources. He has examined physical archives. He has tracked down classmates and colleagues and family members. He has done the work that investigative journalism is supposed to do, and he has published his findings in a major book that has survived legal challenge. His conclusion, stated carefully but clearly, is that Meghan Markle has been dishonest about fundamental aspects of her biography, and that dishonesty, he argues, extends far beyond any single claim. It is structural, it is strategic, and it has been sustained, carefully, for a very long time. Whether her real age is 44 or 48 or somewhere in between, that is almost beside the point. The point is the pattern. The point is the paper trail. The point is that a woman who has built an entire public identity on her personal story may have been quietly, methodically, constructing that story, rather than simply living it. And here is the question I'll leave you with, because I genuinely want to know what you think. If Meghan Markle released her original birth certificate tomorrow, the actual, unaltered, original document, would that surprise you? Or at this point, given everything Bauer has uncovered, do you think that document is never going to see the light of day? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if you want to keep following this story, because it is nowhere near over, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Bauer's new edition is going to land like a bomb. And when it does, you want to be here. We will see you in the next one.